Hello everyone, and welcome back to the MSSU Summer Show. I'm your host, Scott Humphreys, and today with me I have Dr. Hackett, the head of Psychology Department. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So, tell us, what is psychology? Like, I know I took psychology in high school. It was just kind of basic, like, studying of one's mind, but I assume there's a more in-depth answer to, like, what it is.
Psychology defined would be the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. This includes animals as well as humans. This is a pretty broad definition, so you're right, it includes a lot of different areas. Psychology is quite broad, all of it addressing mental processes and behaviors from different types of perspectives. Yeah.
All right, so what got you interested in psychology?
So I think what drew me to psychology is the same as what draws all of our majors to psychology. They have an interest in being able to explain why people do what they do or why animals do what they do. So that's where it starts, and wanting to find yourself in a position where you can help other people. What really directed my passion in psychology was when I took a social psychology class, because that's my area. Social psychology focuses on the social nature of humans, so how we think about other people, how people think about us, how we influence one another, how we relate to one another, so what makes us like people, what makes us dislike people. So it was after I took that class that I really got interested and found kind of my fit in psychology.
That's what made you teach it?
So, that's a good question. I knew I liked social psychology. Once I took that class, I knew that this was, like, I could live this field of psychology. And then I learned, well, what do social psychologists do? The majority of social psychologists are those that go on to get their PhD and then find themselves in academia doing research and teaching. And the idea of teaching and doing research sounded pretty good to me. So yeah, that's how I got here.
Similar answer with pretty much, same with we interviewed Dr. Powell from Dental Hygiene. It was the same thing. She's like, I liked it, but I also like teaching, so I combine them together. So so if you walk us through the course, what are some of the major classes people take when majoring in psychology? Do they do like research labs, or walk us through what happens?
Yeah, so the curriculum for a psychology degree has embedded in it are major areas of psychology. So students would take like a social psychology class, a personality class. They would take abnormal psychology, a conditioning and learning, cognitive. So there's these content courses within psychology that all students would take. Then there are content courses that are part of psychology but more as electives. So students can take human sexuality or psych and film. So there's a variety of other content courses they could take. Within the curriculum, however, we emphasize research, like you mentioned. So we have a sequence of research courses that our students take, starting statistics and then ends with a capstone research course. And this is where students from beginning to end conduct a research project, their own independent research project. It's in this course that they get to cater their interests around a research project. So if they have an interest in working with children, for example, they can do a research project that is maybe observing children or surveying parents and interactions with children. Or if they're interested in mental disorders, they can design a study around that. They conduct their project, and then at the end of the semester, they end with a manuscript, a written research manuscript, and they also present to the department. So it's kind of their baby at the end of their time with us. Yeah.
You mentioned psychology in film. That sounds like just a very interesting class. Describe what that is.
Yeah, so It can vary each semester depending on who's teaching it, but what it does is shows videos and movies, a variety of different movies throughout the semester, and it's identifying psychological concepts within TV, in film. So it's a film class, but you're also applying psychology to it.
It's really because you're almost like picking it apart. You're looking deeper into it. And do you like look at like just the psychological being of like the person you're focusing on, or is it more like you look at the movie and like, well, based on what we know, what gave them motive to do what they did, or just all of it?
All of that, yeah, because all of that is psychology. So it could just be identifying, identifying a character that might have a specific diagnosis. That could be part of it, but it could also be identifying behaviors in individuals in the movie and predicting what is driving their behavior, because that's psychology too, right? Predicting and understanding behavior. So it's all that, yeah.
It seems really cool. Now, do the students get to choose the movie, or is it just up to the teacher?
So it's going to be up to the teacher. The teacher will probably have a list of films that they plan on showing in the section. There might be times where the class has some type of feedback on what movies are shown in the course. But yeah, I think it can vary.
So that would. It seemed really interesting, especially, I mean, I'm a big Star Wars and Lord of the Rings nerd, so
okay, there you go.
I would choose like Lord of the Rings, be like, I want to watch Lord of the Rings and just pick it up. But, so what are all the career paths you can go into with a psychology degree? I know there's like so many other things, there's like such a large thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so generally when people think of psychology, they think of mental disorders, And psychology is that, and a lot of our majors plan on going into that as a career. So therapy and counseling tends to be a big area for people who are interested in psychology. What I think is often overlooked for psychology is that because we're so broad and we're focusing on any mental process and any behavior, it doesn't have to be limited to mental challenges or issues. So there's a lot of other career areas that our students go into that you might not think of. So human resources can be an area. We have students that go on for physical therapy, occupational therapy, law. Individuals can go into law school, become attorneys. They become professors. Probation and parole is an area that students, so there's just a variety of different areas that connect with understanding behavior that people don't necessarily always think of when they think psychology. So a lot of neuroscience is an area because it's heavy research based. That's what psychology is. Applied behavior analysis, which we just recently opened our clinic there on campus, so that's another area. So there's just a lot of areas that people can go into and help, and not necessarily make it be related to abnormal psychology or pathology. Yeah.
So I mean that's actually really interesting because you mentioned a lot of things. You're like, what now? Lawyers kind of make sense because especially for, at least this is me from watching Bull a lot, how they pick out their juries.
Okay,
it's
sure.
like Dr. Bull he graduated with a psychology degree, and he looks at how people react, and that's how they choose a jury. And so I guess maybe that's how some of that comes in, if it helps them choose the jury or build a case better than someone else that does it because they can break it down a little bit more.
Sure.
But some of the other stuff like human resources.
Right.
I wouldn't think. So that, I mean, that's extremely interesting. You know, you said that like almost like therapists. Is that what's popular all the time, or is there something else that's becoming more popular? that people start becoming, or?
I think that becoming a therapist, a counselor is always going to be an area of interest for individuals to pursue. I would say, well, roughly around half, maybe even more than half of our majors want to find themselves in a helping profession. So maybe not a therapist or a counselor, but maybe a caseworker. So those are always, I think, going to be very popular. But I will say some emerging areas of interest. I mentioned neuroscience is one that's really gaining popularity. Another one, I think, because of the demand, would be applied behavior analysis. Again, it's still the helping profession. It's just not the traditional idea of being a therapist or a counselor. I think those are probably the biggies right now. Neuroscience and ABA tend to be pretty popular, but our mental health is always going to be one of the forefront professions that individuals want to go into.
So you mentioned you just opened up a clinic.
We did.
So it's almost like is it student-led, or is it?
So we have Dr. Ayla Schmick is the director of the clinic. She also is a professor in our department. She teaches the applied behavior analysis courses. And it's open to the community, so individuals in the community can receive services there, but it is also a resource for our students. So our students can take ABA courses with Ayla and go from the classroom to the clinic and apply what they're learning in the classroom. So yeah, we have students. It's meant to cater to the community and students that are being trained in applied behavior analysis. Yeah.
That's really, so real quick, can students come in? So you said students can come in, which is good because and the computer, because it's a symbiotic relationship. It helps both of you. Is there a charge for students to come in, or? So it depends. I mean, if a student is wanting services, that's one. So there's two components to it. It's getting services at the clinic, and then it's providing services at the clinic. So students that are providing services at the clinic, they're either getting course credit for it, or as the clinic builds, we'll be able to hire them on, once they get the credentials, their training to be able to provide services, they can be hired on to work at the clinic. I think currently we have one student worker that has the credentials and is working there. To receive services, there is a fee. There are fees associated to receiving services. People within the Lion family do get a discount. That's of course what we're going to do. It's part of the Lion community. So yeah, faculty, staff, and students that are part of the university do get a discount in services. Various. So once again, I'd like to thank you for being here with me today.
Yes.
If any of you would like to learn more about psychology, visit the department page by simply Googling MSSU Psychology. Very simple. I just figured that out a couple days ago. But also stay tuned, because up next we talk to Dr. Locker about everything sociology has to offer.
Missouri Southern State University Department of Communication, where information and experience opens doors you can never imagine. The mission of the department is to investigate, create, and spread information to a global public using a wide variety of communication and media channels. We prepare you for your future with hands-on opportunities using high-quality equipment and a fun learning environment. Allow us to be a part of your journey here at Missouri Southern State University, where connections will last you a lifetime.
Welcome back, everyone, to the MSSU Summer Show. I'm your host, Scott Humphreys, and today with me, I have Dr. Locker, one of our sociology professors. And first off, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And so I have a couple questions for you today. So you teach sociology, which is less known, at least I feel, than some other stuff. Like everyone hears about psychology, studying of just one's mind. But what is sociology, and why is it so important to society?
Well, that is a good question, because when I took Intro to Sociology, I had no idea what it was either. I had a college junior helping me enroll as a brand new freshman, and he said, "You need to take psych or soc." And I said, "What's soc?" And he said, "Sociology." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "It's like psych but groups," which is not quite right, but it's close enough. Most people don't know exactly what sociology is, and that's fine. I don't expect people to, because like I said, I didn't. It's important because, ultimately in society we need to deal with things. We need to deal with social issues, and a society can't deal with problems in the society unless they understand what those problems are and what's actually going on. And so that's what sociologists do. We study social issues and social problems to find out, first of all, what is actually happening, because sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes, people think, oh, there's so much more crime now than there was 30 years ago. Well, there isn't. There's more crime than there was 3 years ago, but there's still less than there was 20 to 30 years ago. And how do we know? Because people are out there studying it and counting it. So at the very basic level, sociologists find out what's actually going on. When we're lucky and smart and work hard, we can figure out why those things are going on. And then if we're really lucky, we can figure out what to do to things that we don't want to happen, what we can do to make them less common, and things we do want to happen, what we can do to make them more common. So the generic definition of sociology is it's the scientific study of society, but what that really means is we find out what's going on and why it's going on, and what we can do to influence that.
So that, to me, that makes perfect sense, because it's much like it's like my major is computer science. Mm-hmm. If there's something wrong with the computer, you can't just look at it and go, "That's wrong." You have to dive into it and go, "What's working, what's not?" So I mean, to me, that's kind of what sociology is. Is you look at society and go, "This is working, this is not. How do we fix that?" And you have to understand it. So, what turned you to major in sociology? Because I assume as a kid, I don't know if you had the same thing, but most of us are like, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a police officer. What made your brain go, I want to do sociology?
It was intro to sociology. By the end of my first semester taking intro to sociology, I had decided that I liked it enough to at least consider majoring in it, and so I took more courses before I really totally decided. And then somewhere along the way, I decided, being a college professor didn't look so bad either, and so, and one of the ways, the way to become a college professor is to get a PhD in something, but the way to be a practicing sociologist is, there are plenty of other jobs involving sociology, but to really do it immersed in it the way I am, pretty much either have to be working for a government agency or, as a university professor. So that's the route I took.
Which was a very, very fair route. I mean, I took your intro to sociology class, and I think it's very interesting just because it's stuff you don't often think about. Sitting at society, you don't think about. For instance, we talked about social classes. You don't think about those because you just go, this is where I sit in society, and that's what you know. But you don't think of, well, why do I sit in this aspect of society, and how can I change that? And so I think a college professor obviously isn't that bad of a job. It seems to be a good enough job. So if someone were to major in sociology today, what would be some of the core classes you think that would make them understand it most, or would be most beneficial to them to take?
Oh, well, we kind of guide people on that. You don't have to a student doesn't have to figure out for themselves which courses to take. But anybody who majors in sociology, obviously you have to start with Introduction to Sociology. The sort of core of the field of sociology from that point is stratification, which is about literally all different kinds of social inequality. And research methods, of course, any science you major in, you're going to have to learn research methods, how to actually do it. And then theory, which is one of the courses I teach, sort of the foundational basics of what makes sociology fundamentally different from, say, psychology or economics or geography, that sort of thing. And then from there on, there are a couple other required courses, but that's kind of the core of the field of sociology, and then plenty of electives, because we want people to be able to pick and choose the courses that fit what they're interested in and what they think they might want to do, for a career once they graduate.
So you mentioned research methods. Is that something that all sociologists use actively and not just actively, but they use often? Or is that just something, depending on which way you go, you use more in others than you do in other places.
I think I understand what you're asking. And no, research, even if somebody isn't doing research on a really regular basis, there are plenty of jobs where you're just, analyzing things, stuff like that. But I think mentally speaking, we're using research methods, the things we learn in research methods classes, all the time, because you always need to think in terms of how do we know this? How do we know this is true or correct? Are there any errors here? That sort of thing. So you kind of need to know. We remember an intro. We spent a couple weeks talking about how to tell if research is done well or not.
Yep.
That's kind of critical. So I think anybody who has any kind of job in a field, either in sociology or even related to it, that research methods, even if they don't feel like they're doing research on a daily basis, we're always using that knowledge and information because everything else is tied back to research somebody did, and you need to be able to tell if they did it well, if they did it properly, if the results are valid, if their results are reliable, that sort of thing.
Yeah, in a way, almost if you're trying to quote something, or it's very valid because you have to, like you said, know which ones are good, which ones you can quote, which ones you can't quote. Especially for you teaching a class, you have to know, I'm giving these people the correct information. Now, this one, and I think I remember you answering this one in intro, but what is one of your favorite classes to teach?
It's intro. I love teaching Introduction to Sociology because it's literally giving people an introduction into the field of sociology. I think everybody in the entire world should take Introduction to Sociology, at some point in their lives, just because one of the things we do in sociology is you learn to see beyond the surface and to see behind things, and again, not just what's going on today, but why is this happening? Why is it happening this way rather than that way? And that's, I think, kind of a critical skill for everybody to have. I enjoy teaching all of my classes. I'm teaching a social media class right now this summer, and that's always interesting. My cults class every year, or nearly every year, is kind of fun. But really, all of my classes I enjoy. That's one of the, to me, odd comments I get on teaching evaluations. Students will say things like, "He seems to really enjoy teaching this class." I'm like, "Well, yeah. Why wouldn't I? This is great stuff." So, but if I had to choose just one, it's the intro. So. Which
I thought was a very interesting class because again, it's almost what got me hooked on sociology because it was interesting to think about. I took psychology in high school. I was like, okay, this guy interesting, but it's different when you're thinking about one person, whereas if you're thinking about a group of people, and it makes it more interesting because it's almost like if you sit at a park and people watch and just kind of you see a group of people and you go, I understand why they're acting that way together, and it makes sense. But you mentioned your social media class. What is that one kind of about? Because I heard you talk about the cults class, but what is the social media one more focused towards?
Well, it's literally all of the effects and ramifications that the social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and people don't think of YouTube as a social media platform, but it is, and various others. To sort of go through, and every week we hit it from a different angle, but all of the impacts that those different social media platforms have had on society over the last 20 years, because they've essentially existed for 20 years or less, depending on which one we're talking about. All the effects they've had on society, all the effects they have on us as individuals, and then also the ways that we use the different social media platforms to interact, to project an image of ourselves to the world. It's practically anything you can think of related to that bundle. You've got social media, you've got society, and you have us as individuals, and that's always, even people who aren't on social media, they just don't realize it because their friends are posting photos of them, or comments where they mention them, that kind of thing. It's become inescapable. So yeah, we're just looking at all of the positive and negative, all of the effects and impacts of the different forms of social media on us and our own lives and on society in general.
That actually brings up great points because that's something you don't think about. Some of the people that go, well, I don't use social media. Well, if you've ever been posted about on social media, if you've ever technically, no, you don't have an account, but you have a presence there because someone's talked about you, so that's something that is very interesting to talk about because I do have several family members that are like, I don't have Facebook. but you've been posted on
You're on
Facebook
it.
because people. Family members go, well, look at this party we had, and you're now on there. Like every year we have a Christmas party. Every year they get posted on Facebook at the Christmas party. So it's very interesting because that's again something that I go, I don't actually think of that often.
Yeah.
Or stuff like I don't have Facebook, but I've been posted on it many times. So that's something that I'm like, okay. So. You said the intro class is something that you think is your best one to teach, or you feel it's almost your favorite
but
one.
it's my favorite, yeah.
And I assume that's also the one you think people will learn the most in as well, correct? Or is it a combination of classes?
I'm not sure I'd quantify any of them as learning the most. I mean, every other class I teach is focused on something specific. Collective behavior is focused on riots and rumors and fads, that sort of thing. And the social media class is focused obviously on social media. Well, the intro, it's, we hit a entirely different topic or area every, week or two all semester long. So it's it's a much more broad approach to this is what sociology is, this is what we do, these are the things we know, this is how we know them, that kind of thing. So that, in that sense, like I said, I wouldn't say you learn the most, but it's maybe the most eye-opening, especially for people who don't even know what sociology is in the first place.
Yeah, it almost like for you, it gets people hooked into it, and from that they just decide where they want to learn more. Because at least for me, and granted it's the only sociology class I've taken, but I feel like I learned a lot from it. And it could be for like several things, like I'm a scuba diver. So when you scuba dive, there's one class that even people even the people who teach the classes go, this is the one class you will learn the most in, because the rest it's like, we don't need to teach you to swim, you can swim. But there's this one class that it's like, you learn the most in this one. And so I didn't know if maybe like the intro class was kind of like, you can already look at other people, but this is a class where you understand why you're looking at those people, and based off of that, how you can understand how they function as a group. Not just like society as a whole, but just looking at like a group of three friends. Why do those group of three friends function together versus why these group of two friends function together? And I feel in that class, I mostly understood that, because I think even just sitting around, you just see people walk by and it's like, I know why they're compatible. So I want to thank you for being here. It was I think sociology is almost one of my favorite classes that I took last semester.
Almost.
Just because it was so interesting. It was something, again, that you just never think about. There's so many things in life that we don't think about until we actually learn more about them. Like, that's really interesting. So again, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your, I assume, since you're teaching class, you're a very busy schedule this summer to be here, talk a little about sociology. If you guys are interested in taking any sociology classes, you can go to the sociology page on the MSSU website and see what classes we're taking here in the fall. So I want to thank you all for being here, and we'll see you all next week.